Welcome to the Austin Downbeat, guys. I'm Kat, your host. This is the 14th episode. Big special guest, Ian Moore, is with us today. I'm a big fan of Ian's, and I'm sure you are too. First, the rundown for this week is May 24th through the 30th. It's Memorial Day week leading into the weekend. Lots of music happening in this town. Here are a few highlights tonight. Los Lobos is at Green Hall. Special shout out to Steve Berlin. He's an amazing producer and a really wonderful human being, that guy. 26th of this week, May 26th, begins the Kerrville Folk Festival. We have a lot of friends of the show playing at Kerrville Folk Festival, and that festival runs through June 12th. So you have plenty of time to catch it. This Friday, one of my favorite cover bands that I haven't seen in a while, admittedly, but I'm dying to get out there and see them again, is Suede, and they are playing at Vincent's on the Lake. And then this Sunday, you have Shiny Ribs at Green Hall. How awesome is that? They're so much fun. And Kevin was just on the show, I think, last week. And then we have Cam Cole is playing at Antone's. And if you don't know who Cam Cole is, here is your big red alert. Cam was on the show Ted Lasso, I think in the last season. He made his debut. Super talented young man, and he's playing at Antone's on Sunday. Let's get into the nitty gritty. We have Ian Moore on today. And guys, I'm always a big fan of who I talk to, really, truly. And it's no exception here. Ian Moore came into my world about 5 years ago. I discovered him through his Luminaria album, and I heard the song New Day, and it literally just changed everything for me. I just never really heard anything like that. And then I just went deeper and deeper and deeper into that album and into his stuff. And he's constantly changing in the most wonderful way. And I know that that's important to him. If you listen to our conversation, you'll hear that. But I love his flexibility, and I love the permission he gives himself to sort of, every album is just kind of a new adventure and a different angle to who he is. And I think a big part of that is because as a Texas expat, he now lives in the Pacific Northwest in a completely different environment. He's a beekeeper on 3 acres, restoring an old boat, and he just has this real way about him, so calm and intentional and conscious. It almost felt like just sitting with him was just a very calming experience. Not what I really expected from like this fire-breathing guitar player, he definitely has that side to him. But since moving up to the Pacific Northwest, he reinvented himself up there as a folk singer. So he just so beautifully blends that together, in my opinion. And anyway, I could go on and on and on. I was so excited that he said yes to coming on the show. And without further ado, I'm just going to be quiet and let you enjoy my conversation with Mr. Ian Moore. Awesome. Ian Moore, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. Yeah. I have to tell you, I've been a fan of yours. I don't really like that word fan because it just feels, I don't know, shallow, I guess. But I got introduced to your music, I think in 2017, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And just like, who is this person? And there's not a lot out there on you. So you're very mysterious.
That's what my wife tells me.
So maybe we can solve some things for her today.
We'll try.
But I have to tell you, I reached out and I was like, whatever, see if he responds. And I think you gave me my first hot flash. You responded and it was a yes. And I just got so hot. So I had to take off my sweater, and my daughter was like, what's wrong? I'm like, Ian Moore said he would come on to the show. She's like, wait, Ian Moore? Because we listened to your music. And so anyway, I just wanted to tell you, I really love what you do. And I'm genuinely curious about you because, like I said, there isn't a ton out there, and I like that. But maybe we just kind of start. I know you are from California. You're
Well, yeah,
born
it's
there?
kind of a weird. It's kind of I mean, I was born in Berkeley, but my folks were living in Austin at the time, and it was just my dad was doing some doctoral work, and I think all that love in San Francisco made me. Sorry, There's a lot of. Well, welcome to
Blowing up.
2022, right? Actually, a friend of mine about some up here in Seattle about some shows this summer, which is exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah, we were living in Austin, or my parents were living in Austin, and my dad was out doing some work at UCB. It was really cool work, actually. Was working with uh, Bill Moyer and oh God, I'm spacing. That's Joseph Campbell, who
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
who's basically the inspiration for Star Wars. I
Yeah.
mean, more than that, but that's kind of the pop culture connection. And there was some really exciting emerging work on spirituality and kind of Jungian archetypes and psychedelic culture and all this stuff that was really growing that kind of died in the next couple of years because of the hippies, and it's just now coming back. So it's you know.
Very interesting. That's really cool. Because I was gonna say you are really considered an Austin musician, even though even currently you're in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I had to leave, and it's funny because people. I mean, I've been gone for 24 years. Two things happen. I mean, I totally had the O. Henry thing go on, which is that you really understand where you're from when you leave the place that you're from. I spent pretty much my whole life in Austin. I mean, preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, until I started touring, and then things just got so crazy. And as wonderful as it is to be loved, and we all want to be loved, and I love to be loved like everyone else. I was really overwhelmed, and I
mhm.
needed, for a number of reasons, to get out of that vortex.
Yeah, yeah. And so your day-to-day life there in the Pacific Northwest, what are your surroundings? I spent time up there. I would imagine they're quite beautiful and calm and grounded.
Yeah, I mean, what I realized is that, my whole life I'm looking for meditations, basically. So I live in the woods. I live on 3 acres. I was just working on I'm restoring an old boat right now. I'm a beekeeper. I fly fish. I hike. Obviously, a ton of my life is playing music and art. And really, I feel like if I think of myself as kind of like part of the army of consciousness of, us all being interconnected as friends and people, my role in the world is to be kind of like the soul brother, because I have a lot of friends that live in the city that are in the hustle and that are doing all this stuff, and they counsel their money, which I'm terrible at, and I counsel them on meditations of the spirit because I have when I'm home I have a lot of quiet time, and I just kind of feel like that is kind of part of my gig, I guess.
Hmm. When you're in that space, which sounds like you're in that space a lot, is that where does the songwriting come into that? Is it I've talked to some people that every day they're writing and getting that, as a conduit, or what's your experience with the songwriting piece?
Songwriting is definitely a meditation. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, especially in modern times, is that we're living in by far the noisiest time of all time.
I
It's
mean,
like on
could
cue,
you
it's
explain
like I've
that more
got
perfectly?
well, no, I mean, that is exactly what the thing is that people can get a hold of you at any time. And, like for instance, you try to turn stuff off and then there's it seems like there's always an emergency the second you try to drop out. For me, writing dropped into a thought, and it doesn't mean that everything has to be deep. That's false equivalency. What I think is just like for me to take a concept and take it to that next level where it really resonates and says something that I'd be interested in hearing and that I want to say, it takes me dropping into a different space. So if I'm
Mhm,
constantly, and this is actually a thing I've been really thinking about a lot because I'm pretty busy and I have a lot of hats, like a lot of us.
mhm.
Um, and as an example, so I'm the president of a nonprofit up here, and we have a new um, kind of social media black person, and she was talking about my involvement with Smash, with my nonprofit.
Mhm.
And she was like, "Oh, well, you just should post like this and we'll make it fun and da 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 da." And I was like, "Well, I totally get it. I understand what you need, and I will do my best to do that. But just so you know, the things that I do that make me powerful in this world are the opposite of that. And when I go into that space, it really weakens my actual core strength.
Mm.
Because when I'm in, like I spend, I try to not so me stuff. I spend a lot of time like everybody, and it really is super. To me, it brings my consciousness to a very kind of like a horizontal level as opposed to vertical. It just feels like I'm just vibrating on this thought and this thing and that thing as opposed to one thing. And
Mhm.
so when I'm writing, I need to be on one thing.
Mhm. Just kind of quiet everything out and really get singularly focused, not just in the depth of that moment, whatever's coming through in the
Yeah,
whole
just
depth
be
of that.
open to it. I mean, because I'm a big fan of music outside of, what I make. I'm a big
Mhm.
fan still. And when you hear someone just turn a phrase or something like the way a melody changes or harmony or anything, those things. It's just somebody took a second longer than the other person to
Yeah.
really like maybe like what the okay like when I do my workshops, my songwriting workshops, and I'm talking to people about writing, and we're talking about narrative perspective. One of the things I love to say is there's a Wilco song from a long time ago where Jeff Tweedy says, "The ashtray says you were up all night," and
Oh,
it's just such a beautiful way to say it. It's so evocative, right? You just immediately are like can see the
the
you know t-
visual.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it what took him taking that idea past the logical thing or the first thing would be to say, I came home, you've been up all, you know what I mean? To take it in like first person. And the fact that he twisted that around, that's why he's a great songwriter. And he took the time to kind of drive it down to a more interesting perspective.
Yeah. And like to look at, I write as well. And I usually start my day writing. And one thing that I like to do is similar to that is like look around. Like when I'm writing, I like to kind of drop in and look at all the walls, right? And so like, but just in that example, it's like he looked around the whole room and thought about all the little things that could point back, right, to the main
Mm-hmm.
event of what
Mm-hmm.
happened. And I think that's what's so cool when a writer does that, because it's
I
like,
love it too.
yeah, it's like such a trivial thing, but it paints such a huge picture. I love that.
The same thing with singing. I mean, or even guitar playing. It's a one of the things now that just I'm kind of in my I guess grouchy old man phase of my life there, which I've been since for what it's worth since I was about 12. But I've never like the thing of where so many people in the United States and Western just basically the West, their idea of music comes now from the competitive shows, whichever one, The Voice, whatever.
Mhm.
And the thing about that is that what's happened. Well, there's a lot of things that are I think are wrong with that, but
Mhm.
one of the things that's interesting is that the people are good at so many different things, but they're not really good at anything.
Mhm.
And it's because when you hear somebody like when you hear Adele sing, you're just like, oh fuck, like it's real, and you can feel it's real, and it's a very different thing from somebody who's just taken the thing to emulate a style. And it's the same thing we're talking about with songwriting. It's when you hear someone sing with their authentic voice, or when somebody plays something on an instrument with a little bit more intention and focus, it's really, really powerful. And we've
Mhm.
all been moved by the multiple times. I mean, um, it happens all the time to me, and I'm constantly like, that's the thing that kind of excites me, and it's typically nothing that has to be like revolutionary. It's a small little revolution, like to somebody the
Yeah.
way they enunciate differently, and you're like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Did you see the movie Coda by chance?
Coda.
CODA. It just won Best Picture Academy Award.
Oh, well, then is it out? Is it still out in theaters? Yeah,
No,
because
you can stream it. You can stream it. And the reason why I
yeah,
bring it up is because CODA stands for Children of Deaf Adults. and
Oh,
it is all about music, and I think you would dig it.
yeah.
So I'm not going to give away the ending, but it, like what we're talking about, the girl that is the main character, she's the only hearing person in her family. So
Oh,
her
cool.
parents are deaf and her brother's deaf, and she's the only hearing, and she's a singer.
Oh,
And how
wow.
ironic is that? And she finds her voice through this movie. There's so many things happening in that movie, but she finds her voice, and she finds her real gritty, not pretty
Hmm.
voice. And signing has a lot to do with that
Oh,
too.
wow.
It is, I don't know if you're a crier.
Try to
It,
be.
oh man, it's
Yeah.
so moving, but it really, I think it kind of touches upon things that we're talking about like that. Um, yeah, your song New Day is one of my favorites. One of the first, I think it's the first song of yours that I have ever heard. And so it
Oh,
kind of sticks in there as my OG fave.
cool.
And it kind of reminds me of what we're talking about. You're not
Yeah.
talking about anything revolutionary in that song, you
No,
know?
it's the beautiful thing is that when you feel something, like people study all this stuff now about microaggressions and all that, and like, how you can like look at someone and you can tell, you can always tell. Maybe you won't tune into it, and you can tell when somebody's saying something true.
Yeah.
And I was saying something true. I remember writing that song. I remember the feeling of like, just it's interesting because so many songs have been written about love, and especially about the struggle of love and the attempt to try to make it through because it's so hard for our souls to hold on, right? And
Mhm,
not fall off along the way
mhm,
under the best circumstances,
mhm.
and like, oh, our love was so great, but we just, it's like and so that theme is never ever going to be old. It's the, most beautiful theme in the world. Is love, is the fact that, what's rough and rocky turns the valley green. I mean, there's nothing, you don't really know what love is when you're 21 and you're in love with your boyfriend or girlfriend. It's, I mean, it's all pheromones and excitement. Love is really when you've been through some shit and you actually are like, you know what, I'm staying. I love this person. Then that's a whole nother level. And I couldn't have written that song in my 20s.
Right. It just, as a listener, that song, especially, in the beginning, it's very simple, it's very understated, but I think it takes a person understanding what you just said, knowing that love is gritty and sweaty and dirty. It's a verb, and it stays. And that's
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
sometimes. It takes
Yeah.
someone, I think, knowing that to then listen with their ears to that song and really feel that.
But that's what's so great about music is you get what you need when you need it, and you don't
Yeah.
even know what you need. And sometimes like one of my favorite things to do is people, not that everyone has to like Dylan, but people that don't like Dylan, and then like oftentimes it's like, oh, you will, you just wait, you will, you're gonna find there's gonna be a point where all these things that seem kind of like blah, blah, are gonna be like the truest things you've ever heard in your
Yes.
life.
Yes, I had this conversation with someone. I can't remember who it was, but it's on the show. We talk about that where it's like, and I was telling the person like that must make you feel like you can really sit in confidence of being who you are when you are that person in your path in this career, because they'll catch up. The people will catch up. You will be what they need when they're
It,
ready for it.
it's the biggest thing. I've had so many record deals and things, and and I mean, I'm still actively. It's interesting. I'm still actively. I will do this till I die. I'll be like constantly pushing and fighting for my space because I really have a lot I still want to say. But
Yeah.
I do a lot more where I'm mentoring, young people just kind of organically. Sometimes it's just literally after a show and talking to somebody because again, we are living in a time, it's never been an easy time, but we're living in a time where the opportunities to be successful are so tricky. I mean, trickier than ever. You think, when the big companies came down and the internet promised this freedom, that it was going to be this there are the gates kind of came down, but then the Huns overtook the city, and so kids are so desperate to make it, and they're just and then they've got all these people telling them the worst information in the world, like what you got to do. You got to get your foot in the door, and then you can do whatever you want. And it's like that's a bunch of fucking bullshit.
Hmm.
I don't really know how to say this. I'm trying to think of how to say this without being crass. But the problem is that if you don't define your space and you don't really basically trust yourself, this is kind of what the point that I'm trying to get to is we only have one thing, and that is what we really believe. And once you compromise that and start trying to be something that you think you're supposed to be, you're screwed. You're completely lost. And you will, if you're lucky, maybe you'll find it at some point in your life. So the only thing that you have is what you believe. And so whatever it is at whatever time, like, the song you're talking about from Luminaria, that was a very specific time in my life. I had young kids. Joleen and I were, young parents in a place where we didn't know a lot of people. My dad had just died. There was so many things. And so that record is really a reflection of all of those things and the people that connected to that and the
Mm.
people that didn't connect to that. It's sometimes people will get mad at me about a record I make or they don't like it or they don't. And I'm like, look, it's don't, wait for the next one or whatever. But I can only do the things that I believe
Where
in.
you're at. Yeah. I was going to ask you, I have it written down. Luminaria, what was going on in your life at that time? Because it does sit
But,
in kind of its own thing. And that was the first music that I came to
yeah,
with you. And so I'm just so in love with that album.
I love
But I
it.
was really curious because I've listened to a lot of your other stuff too, and it's different. And so, um, yeah, thank you for answering that question without even knowing it. Because
Well, the other thing that was really exciting too is that, I just moved up to the Northwest and, in Austin, I had left behind this, at the time, what felt like a really repressive kind of thing. Now it doesn't feel that way to me, but I so desperately was trying to define myself
mm,
by my own terms. And, you know, um, when I moved up here, it was really cool because nobody knew me.
mm.
And I just reinvented myself as a folk singer. And, back in Austin at this point, I'm like a fire breathing guitar player. And, and that was a really strong head back then. It's hard to probably imagine what it was like, but it was pretty intense. And I remember a lot of a few of my peers were going through similar things. It was a really strange time. And so I get up here and there's just different musics, different people,
Mhm.
the weather's different, so you feel different. I would always say, like, I would look out my back window in the spring or fall and I wouldn't have been surprised if Nick Drake had stepped out of the woods in a serape, because like he could be.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in Texas, it just has such a different feeling, which is great. It's
Mhm.
got that. In Texas, I always think of like the heat, that does that thing where it looks like things are melting,
Yeah.
and and there's Germans and there's Mexican people and there's this gigantic. Everybody's loud and boisterous, so very different places.
Yeah. And so that's really pulling different vibes out of you, and you're able to drop into different spaces, and therefore different music comes out of you up
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they're all me. They're just different feelings
Well,
and
yeah,
different.
just different versions and pieces of who you are.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, you got your Friday night going out with the girls, and then you got your Sunday hanging out with having tea.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's so many different feelings, and it's interesting because when electronic music started becoming a newer dominant form, and remember when it started kind of creeping into pop culture, I was kind of excited because I felt like it would maybe give artists like me a little bit more latitude and freedom because electronic music, since you weren't in theory creating it all, it didn't matter if you brought some reggae and some this and that and you could mishmash it all together,
Mhm.
and the way I was brought up in Austin, and the music scene that I was brought up around, it was like that because people were open-minded and big-minded. And then
Mhm.
when I started playing music in the world, things got a lot more conservative and things were way more like, oh no, you're this or you're this or you do that. And
Mm,
I've struggled with that my whole career because I want to be an artist that like my goal is to blow people's minds and like freak them out where they're like, wait, that's Ian? Like I
mm,
want to do that every record. I want to be like Jimi Hendrix or like the Beatles or like that era where this record was like this and this next record was a big step forward in each one. And
yeah.
and even now, because I'm kind of in this, I guess, formative phase right now where I'm trying to find this, I can feel this reverberance, but I can't quite put my finger on it, of where I'm at in terms of a record or what my next thing would be.
But you can feel it's coming.
Yeah, and the main thing is I want to do something. I just want to. I love surprising people. It's just really. It's not even love. It's not love. You know what? It's not love. It is just me.
Yeah.
I am. I blame my father. My dad had a Tonka. My dad was a Buddhist scholar, so he had a Tonka. It's actually in our living room of Shenje, and Shenje is the basically represents change.
Oh, wow.
And so when you remanifest your energy in different iterations of your consciousness, we are scared. Like we're scared of dying. We're scared of change. And he had that over my crib when I was a little kid, and I guess
Okay.
that's who I am. That's what I like. I like moving around and doing stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like as a kid, I was rearranging my room all the time, and I'm constantly moving stuff around in my own home and just like my own bedroom still.
Feeling
I
that.
always like a fresh perspective and like mix it up a little bit, you know?
Isn't it interesting though the combination and really people are very you can really tell like some I mean I have grown to really love some things that I didn't know I loved. I really love seeing the same thing sometimes, which I never had done. Like during the pandemic, for instance, I would walk my dog on these trails right around our house, and after about 3 or 4 months of it, I was like, I've never done this in my life. I've literally never been home longer than a month in my life as an adult. I mean, since I was 18, 19 when I started touring. And
Wow.
so being able to see little subtle changes in the flowers and stuff was
Oh,
pretty cool for me.
that's great. That makes me happy for you that you have that in your life. It's nice to be able to mix things up, but it's nice to have the choice to do it, you
Yeah,
know?
that's a big one for me. Another thing too probably is, I have a great career. I mean, I just went out on tour and played, pretty good shows. Like lots of people showed up, and and I don't have like a big corporation behind me or anything. And then what's cool about it, and this is something that a lot of people, nobody ever really talks about it. It's like life work balance in music. Nobody. It's like either
Just a
either
great
you're like
balance.
you're the Foo Fighters, right? You're on tour for like 12 years or whatever, and
Yeah.
you're having a blast, but you know what I mean? Maybe that's a loaded example now with Taylor dying, but maybe that's part of it is that no matter how cool, okay, check this out. I just went and saw McCartney. I'm a huge Beatles fan. I mean, I maybe would put like Darren. I mean, there's very few people that like the Beatles more than I do that I know.
Good to know.
Um, I've read every book and everything. I know everything. Blah blah blah. So I went and saw. I've never seen McCartney before because I'm always on tour. The tickets are so expensive,
Mhm.
and I knew I just was like, I just need to go because I mean, it would be ridiculous to not see him. And what was really interesting to me, I mean, it was great to see him, and he's fantastic, and I mean, Paul McCartney. He wrote "Let It Be." You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
just his impact. But what was striking to me was he seemed a little fakey, and that kind of I was really wanting to have this
Mm,
super deep, because it was McCartney. And so anyhow, I had to work through that whole thing. I'm not saying he was. This is just my perspective.
mhm.
And then for me, because it bothered me, like to be at this thing, and then I realized I'm like, God, even if you're Paul fucking McCartney, even if you're Paul McCartney from the Beatles, you still might want to do some other stuff other than play on stage. You still might maybe want to be home with your wife, and maybe you want to be hanging out with your grandkids. I mean, who knows, And so what if there's 20,000 people and you're it doesn't really matter. in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that nobody ever talks about is, and I guess now that I'm kind of the dust is settling a little bit, I'm realizing that for me, I was trying to kind of get a life work balance where I
Mhm.
could call the shots and I didn't have some company telling me when I had to go. And I still consider that because I work with a boutique agency and, I don't get on a lot of big festivals. Like most of the festivals I get on are ones where they contact me. And
Mhm.
that's a little frustrating because, I'd love to be playing, ACL every other year and playing, whatever all the big ones are. And those are booked by, for the most part, giant agents.
Mhm.
But the other side of that is that when you're on an agency like that, you have to stay out on the road, period.
Mm.
So, tricky balance.
It is. So, what do you have going on now? I see that you are coming to Texas in July.
Yeah, I've got my well, what I've got, okay, musically what I've got going on, I'm actually trying not to get overwhelmed because I'm busy as hell. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm just a little like kind of like, oh man, I'm not gonna be home. Um,
Yeah.
so once I do those shows in the summer, because those are my birthday shows, and what's happened is that I'll do like a couple shows in Austin, some shows around there, and then I'm gonna come up and do the same thing up here.
Mhm.
And then it's like fall festival season, so I've got like a festival in Alabama, a festival in Reno, Nevada. I mean, and they're big, rad festivals. And so,
Awesome.
typically I'll do like a tour around all those. And so I just kind of looked at my calendar and I was like, I'm not really home until January once July hits. I mean, I'll be home for a couple of days here in a couple of days, but not really.
Yeah.
So I'm busy. I'm doing yeah, I'm doing a bunch of festivals. I'm playing my birthday shows.
And your
Uh,
birthday is August 8th.
mhm.
Is that your birthday? Yeah. I remember seeing like once I was aware of you, I was like, oh yeah, he comes here and plays at Antone's and does this big
Mhm.
birthday show. And it's awesome. It's awesome. Um, Well, I want to, before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about this new album that you put out called And All the Colors,
Mhm.
and just talk a little bit about that. It's really good. I've been listening to it all day.
It's actually an old. I see. This is what's funny about it. It's an old album, but
Oh,
it's just been so
re-release.
it's just been released on digital platforms because that record was not is was it's my record, but the label was Walter Yetnikoff from Sony, and then blah blah blah, and I couldn't get a hold of it. I couldn't do it, and then finally I tried and tried and tried for years to put it out. It's my third record, and it's actually you know what? If you listen to it, if you listen to my second record and listen to my third record, everything starts to make a lot more sense. And that was part of what was driving me crazy. It went from modern day folklore to I don't know what's the I don't remember, maybe like green grass, and
It
then
it went to modern day folklore to Luminaria.
so that's crazy. See, that's what I mean.
Well, and I was gonna say, because Magdalena, I've heard that before.
Yeah, that
Like,
song actually. Yeah,
yeah,
that
and I
song
was
was.
like, oh, but I think I've heard that song before, but this is a 2022 album, so yeah, I
Yeah.
got confused.
No, but I do love that. It's a really cool record. I mean, it's like talking about your kids. I mean, what
Mhm.
was neat about that record, so And All the Colors, was basically we had made the third record with my original band, the Ian Moore band, and then we got dropped from the label because it was going in that direction. And ironically, I mean, just more from a not like uh, like oh it coulda shoulda, but more just from a I think honestly if that record my third record had come out it would have been by far the biggest record I ever had because it was the most pop that I ever was. I was really in this like deep Stevie Wonder phase, and
Mm.
it's kind of like we were doing this kind of soul rock thing that ended up breaking huge like the next couple of years. But it was just kind of like it was a weird thing because people were not making there's a weird jump when you're kind of like a bluesy guitar player. People want you to stay in that lane. It's a pretty narrow lane, and I know a lot of like I have a lot of friends that are great guitar players, and pretty much outside of John Mayer, nobody has been able to kind of do that. He's like kind of a unicorn in that he was able to be a pop star and then also become a a kind of a blues guitar rock hero, which was kind of like what I was trying to do a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is you probably you've been around enough and interviewed enough people. It's always the same story. It's not really about what you do; it's about your team. And when I have the right team around me, if I make a good record, then that's really what happens. And I had a great team on my first couple of records, and then I've had a couple of times where I like Luminaria had a pretty good team. It was Yep Rock smaller, but they worked their butts off, and those things make more of an impact. So then when you macro out, people will be like, oh yeah, Ian has got that record, and then that record, and that record, you know,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. All right. And so you have new music buzzing in your bones. And are you
yeah.
recording yet? Are you just in the writing stage, or where are you
No,
at
I
with
can.
that?
I've been on this thing. Like I'm back to really practicing my guitar all the time. It's so funny.
Wait,
It's
Ian Moore practices guitar. Okay,
I
let me write this
practice
down.
all the time.
That's encouraging.
Um, it takes a lot. The people that I would like to compare myself to are amazing. And the thing is, that's the thing. Like you can't be the master of all things. So
Yeah.
most people are like they're a songwriter, or you're a guitar player, or you're a singer, or maybe you're a great singer. It's a pretty good guitar player. A great guitar
Mhm.
player is a pretty good singer. And like I've just gone through a phase where I was just like, man, I really fell in love with the guitar again, and I started really trying, like back when I was a little kid, trying to like, okay, I got to get better at this. And
Mhm.
it's hard. It takes like a lot of time and a lot of practice. And so that's kind of what I do right now is I practice a lot, and I don't really know what like I'm just a weirdo, and I don't really know. I have no idea what the next record is going to be like. I have a couple of songs, a couple of tunes I like. There's one that I've been playing for a while that sounds like a Willie Nelson song. It's like a real old timey kind of sounds like it could have been written in the 50s or 60s. And
Cool.
that's kind of that's like an anthem thing. That's the only new tune I have that I'm playing. And then I've got, a ton that are like I write a lot, so I have a lot of songs, but nothing that I'm flipping out over yet. So I'm kind of just, I don't worry about it and just kind of like figure that, it comes when it comes. And I've made so many records. And I mean, I released 3 records in like 9 months about 2.5, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, I don't need to be in a hurry. And I'm not in a hurry. And I don't think the
Yeah.
world wants me to be in a hurry.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're really surrender just that thing that needs to come through you, and there's no hurry for that, and you're just gonna wait till it comes until you feel like you're ready to release it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good, really good. Plus, you're so freaking busy coming
I'm
up.
pretty busy. I'm pretty busy.
So yeah. And
That's it.
the good news for you about your guitar playing is you also happen to be a great singer. So like, my favorite thing is when you just slide up into that falsetto. You do that so well. That's such a classic. That's so classic Ian Moore for me, and how I listen, got sort of my entry point into who you are, and I just love it. So
It's funny. It's like now, like everybody does falsetto, but when I was young, nobody sang falsetto. And I literally, to this day, remember when I met Jeff Buckley because
oh, don't even tell me.
he
Wait.
was like the first guy that I'd met where I was like, oh, dude, you sing like me. I mean, like he's obviously different and he's amazing, but I just meant like stylistically, I was like a fucking freak, man. When I was a kid, just because all guys, nobody sang a falsetto back then. No white dudes did.
Oh, they
And
all wanted to go low, like
well, it was like the '90s. It was all like "Rawr, that kind of singing. A lot of guys were. That was the way men sang.
yeah.
And I remember when Jeff Buckley. I remember meeting him. I remember when Rufus Wainwright came out, and then and then I remember when Tom York from Radiohead, and there was like, I was like, oh shit, people are actually like not in just soul music, but in like in rock and roll and stuff. People are singing, and now it's part of the voice. Like it's a very common thing. But it was funny when it felt, I'm not saying that nobody was doing it, but it felt like nobody was doing
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
at
No, I
least in
think
the
it's
world I
fair.
was in it.
Yeah, you're
I got
definitely.
teased, I got teased a lot as a young man about my voice, just
Oh.
because it was, I remember being very sensitive about it, but it was kind of like, the girls liked it, so I kind of just stuck with it.
Way to stick in there. We are so glad that you did. Well, on that note, we are so glad that you stopped by and spent a little bit of time with us. I'm going to definitely mark my calendar, and I will make sure everybody knows when you're closer to the Austin area, and I'll try to get out maybe to your birthday show.
Yeah, come out to my birthday show.
I
I'm
would love.
I'm excited about this. This is gonna be super fun.
Is this a big birthday, or is this just kind of one of the middles?
I think every year you survive another year. It's a big birthday.
It's an
Uh,
excellent point.
yeah, I know it's not like like a decade. I guess Patton Oswalt says once you hit 50, no, once you hit 40, you don't get a birthday for every decade.
I love
No,
them.
it's just for me, it's just an opportunity. Like for everybody knows, like as people get older, like you really have to let people know. Like when you're a kid, you just be like, you tell, I could, if we were like buddies, if we were 20, I'd just be like, hey Kat, I'm playing tomorrow, and you'd be like, okay, cool, and you could probably come. And now like people need like 6 months so they can
Oh,
set up
such a production. It's so
you know
ridiculous. I try not to live my life like that. Like I'm the kind of person that I guess it's aggressive to just FaceTime someone. Did you know this? You can't just out of the blue FaceTime people anymore. Like that's my style.
Oh, I don't know the rules. I have no idea what.
Yeah, I'm just like I'm always gonna stay old school. I'm always gonna keep my calendar light enough so that it's not a big production to go to a show. I'm always gonna, if I feel like seeing your face and having a conversation with you, I'm gonna click FaceTime. Answer
Right
it,
on.
don't answer it. I don't care.
Right on.
All
Well,
these
yeah,
little
no, I mean,
rules can suck it.
I agree. I agree. It's more that as somebody that's that has to understand public mass consciousness.
Yeah.
I had to make that, I realized like, I do things that are like that, and people will like, they love the coming to the thing each year, and they know like I do one up here and everybody knows, and it's cool. I really, I never liked that kind of stuff when I was young, and now I've grown to love that the most. I really love tradition. I really love like, because people feel emotional about it, and when people feel emotional, it makes for a better experience for everyone.
Yeah, everyone's a little deeper rooted
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
there.
yeah.
I
It
love
feels
that.
deep. My birthday shows feel deep because I don't play a lot in Austin. So when I come, there's often, I went to high school, and you know what I mean. I've got all I like. I'll see like people, like 40 people from my high school, and that's a
Oh,
long time ago. So it's cool to, and they feel connected, and it's just cool.
meaningful.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
meaningful.
Well, now that I've gotten a chance to talk to you and I really get a feel for who you are and what you bring to everything that you do, I'm not surprised by that. And you just feel like a really intentional human being. And I
Trying.
love what comes out of you and what you create. And I really appreciate you taking some time to hang out with me.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going on a retreat tomorrow morning. I'm super excited for the weekend. So I'm like, this is
Oh,
a kind of a recharge, kind of get out of this world for a few days.
well, I feel extra special that you snuck this in right before that. I really
Good.
appreciate it.
It's good talking
Awesome.
to you. It was a really nice conversation. Thank you for being so like, easygoing, and just felt like we were just rapping.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I like to do. That's kind of the value set of this show is to really shine a light on who you are, pull away the image and the persona and the fame and all that stuff. And I just really want to find out who Ian is and how he feels about whatever we want to talk about.
Uh,
You even got a little snort, Ian.
I consider that a win.
I don't know if anyone's gotten a snort out of me yet.
I'm gonna make sure. I'm gonna look down the lineup, and I'm gonna be like, "You guys get a snort. I got a snort."
How
Took
about
till the
this?
end of the thing.
I'll do a little pig emoji only on the episodes with the people that get a snort. So so far you're gonna be the only one.
Right on. Great talking to you. Have a good evening. I'm gonna go get some bone broth.
Awesome. You are an inspiration. I love it. Thank you so much for stopping by, Ian.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye.